This is Kitzur Yomi as we continue learning the halachas of Melicha. Simin Lamid Vav, we pick it up from Sif Yud Aleph. We're knee deep in the Melicha process. We already spoke about hadacha, about rinsing it, about soaking it in water, about drying it to the point that it's not mamish dry, but it's not soaking wet. And then we move on to the salt, the not fine, not coarse, but medium salt, and it has to be in a situation in which the blood can drain out. The meat should remain in the salt for an hour. Should be there for an hour. It's enough for 24 minutes. After it's there for the hour or 24 minutes, brush off the salt. If you rinse it 3 times, very well. And a woman who's the area Hashem, she herself should rinse it off. Why? Because the one who brings in the water, you got to realize he's got a water carrier. And therefore, you're not going to have, if she's the one rinsing it, she's not going to want to use so much water because she got to carry more water. So the balas abayi should be the one to rinse it to make sure sufficient water is used. So should not be in a vessel without water before it is rinsed. So you brush off the salt, and then it's rinsed 3 times. Strictly zaver by face with chicken. Have to be careful. It's a reish kodem ashriya to remove the head before soaking. If you salt it with the head, you got to ask a shayla. That's not even salted. Should not be placed in a place where there might be a little bit of salt. Why? Because it's going to allow the blood to be reabsorbed back in. There should be a vessel for the meat before it is salted. Nothing else in there. It sticks to the kliya and I clean nidbak bahem. Safety as vava reish as you can lay it. You got to cut it off as we saw. It's a kurim shalav, and now you got to take the brain and tear the membrane. It has to have the brain, the head has to have its own separate melicha process. If the brain is salted without removing this outer membrane, it's going to collect in the skull and it will not work. So you got 3 salting processes so far. You got the body, you got the head, and you got the brain. Bones with marrow, if it's attached to the meat, then it's salted with the meat. If it's separated from the meat, when it's salted by itself, it should not remain with the meat when it's being salted. So now we have a 4th salting process for the marrow bones that are disconnected. Ragle behemoth, the leg of the animals, you got to cut off the hooves before you soak them. So the blood can come out. Again, in a manner that the blood can drain. You don't have to remove the hair. The heart, you got to rip it open, so that the blood comes out of the heart. The lungs, you also cut it open. You open up the larger tubes. The liver, now this is important. Liver is a tricky process. Liver is a kashrus process, meaning you got to be careful with liver, and whether we're going to do this or not, we have to be real. We'll point out this is one of the big reasons why you have to have a good hashgacha. This is very relevant in places where they have, Sephardi hashgachas, it's a different process, like Eretz Yisrael, etc. So the covenant is a lot of blood. Lechatchila cannot be cooked, cannot be made fit for cooking by the salting. So what do? Salting is not enough to get out the blood. You got to roast it on a fire. The roasted draws out the blood. First, you got to cut it. And place through the cut side over the fire. And so that the fire draws out all the blood. And you got to rinse it before it goes over the fire. So you're cutting it up, rinsing it well, and you put over the fire with a little bit of salt. That the little bit of salt is going to pull out the blood, and then the fire will remove the rest. And you have to roast it until it's fit to eat. And then afterwards you rinse it to clean it from the blood that has been discharged. So if you're listening carefully, it is impossible to get raw 100% liver. Not possible. Why not? Because you can't do Melicha on liver. So therefore, how can you get kosher liver? The only way to get kosher liver is if it's sli, if it's roasted over an ish, then rinsed well, and then you could cook it. So there's an extra step in liver, and again, if it's not going to be roasted properly, and as the Kitzur mentioned, best with a little bit of salt, it's not going to remove all the dam. Shichle Zerlet says a davka leish, says the Kitzur chavalev over a fire of lo betan or garuf, not in a shoveled out oven, not just a hot oven. You need a mamish and ish. Also should not be wrapped up. Garua, even in pork paper, but rather it has to be directly over a fire. Do not salt it before roasting it. The same way that you salt meat. Note 38 points out for the Taz and the Shach. Number one, the reason is you might come to cook it. Number two, it draws out the blood to the surface, and the fire is only going to get rid of that blood and might push it back in. So therefore, Mikol Shekain, She'en Lemloch, Kavin, and Mabasar B'yachad, certainly it can't be salted together. So a little bit of salt, and then roasting it directly over a fire, and then rinsing 3 times. Hatchol, the spleen, didn't kishar basar. The spleen is like regular basar. Is like krum shalav, but rather you got to remove the membrane from the top of the spleen. You also have to do nikor to get rid of the sinews. You take the top of the sinew, you pull it, and you got to get it out. Okay, we're not going to go deep into this because you really got to see what's going on, and you have to know what the spleen and the membranes are. The rectum and other parts of the intestines, salt on the outer side, the stomach of the calf that there's milk inside it. You got to pour out the milk before you do the shriya. Why not? Because if not, you can have milk and meat mixed together. And finally, eggs found in a bird after it was slaughtered. Whether they're small or fully developed. The egg inside the bird after the bird was shechted has a din of basar. And therefore, it needs to be treated like basar. It needs to be rinsed, it needs to be salted, and then it needs to be soaked, rinsed, and salted. Basar should be salted near the meat. It should be separated. These are very unique eggs. These are eggs that have a din of basar and cannot be eaten with milk. We'll pick it up from Sifach Zayin in the next year. B'siyata Dishmaya.